Next on the agenda will be a presentation of the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, presented by Mike Inamine and Michael Bissett. Mike is the executive director of the program, and Michael Bissett is the director of our engineering efforts.
Thank you, Mayor Buckland. Michael Bissett, of course, won't be making it this evening. I'm going to give a brief presentation. This is the annual session. This is the annual presentation that we give to constituent agencies of the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency on what happened last year, what we're planning for next year, what's happening in the ground this year with regard to construction. Next. I'm going to make this kind of an abbreviated presentation and spend a little bit of time giving our audience a little bit of time on why the agency was formed and maybe a little bit of Levy 101 before I get into what I think is the meat of the presentation, what is what happened last year, what's going to happen next year. Next slide. So Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency is basically a partnership between 4 communities, 2 counties, and 2 levee districts. So Sutter County, Butte County, Biggs, Gridley, Live Oak, Levee District 1, Levee District 9 came together back in 2007 and decided to sort of join forces in order to advance flood protection projects. That's basically what a joint powers authority means. That's what was passed through an assessment in 2010. An assessment is essentially a fee that's taken, it's a fee that's voted on throughout all these communities in the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency area, and we use that money to leverage more money to build things. And I'll get into what that means in a little bit. So the goals of the agency are unchanged. So this slide is, for members of the council, is probably an old one. I have filled it out with some of the additional goals, subordinate goals actually, to our original goals of the Flood Control Agency as outlined in the strategic plan, and that's on the website for the public to look at. But essentially, the goals of the agency are unchanged, and that is to achieve 200-year protection for the sort of the yellow portion of the map from Yuba City north, and 100-year level of protection for sort of the orange area of the map in the south. Those are unchanged. But as we've reported both to this council and to the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency Board of Directors, there's a number of strings attached to those funding agreements, recent laws, and requirements leading to the subordinate goals that are underneath the 100 and 200 year. So next slide. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. I just want to mention and sort of highlight that there are 4 programs and projects that are in the news that folks are hearing about. Many folks in this room are going to be participating in directly. The first, of course, is kind of the big show, which is the Feather River West Levee Project, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. And that's the big construction project that is going on right now on the west bank of the Feather River. The second item is a Laurel Avenue critical levee repair. That's an important repair that's outside of the big Feather River West Levee project, the $300 million project. This is a new project that we just received funding right at Laurel Avenue, and we recently received a commitment of funding, and that's going to be taken off this year as well. So that's news. The third item is the Sutter Basin Flood Risk Management Project. That's a long name for a federal investment project. So typically projects are built by local agencies like us, Yuba City, and all of our constituent agencies, or they're built by the state of California, or they're built by the federal government. In the case of the big construction project, this is being built by Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency, this partnership in the state of California. The third bullet indicates really the first time the federal government, well, first time in a long time, the federal government has decided to invest in the agency, invest in our service area. And so you'll be seeing a lot of advocacy efforts, and members of this council will be participating in some of those advocacy efforts to get appropriations for a federal project in the basin. And some of them, notably Mr. Cleveland, were part of that initial effort to garner the authorization of 2014, the Act of Congress. Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan, again, is another partnership, whereas the JPA is a partnership between everybody on the west side of the Feather River. The Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan includes not only our communities on the west side of the river, but everybody on the other side of the Feather River. So everybody from in Yuba County and Sutter County, Butte County, they've joined forces with us in the Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan. That'll be important because we had received another grant from the state of California to advance a couple of important efforts, including long-term O&M planning and some reform measures that we're seeking for FEMA regulation in deep floodplains. Next slide. So the rest of these slides, I'm going to be talking about the construction project, the work that's been underway since 2013. So these big design and construction projects to fix 37 miles of levee, and that's what we're doing with the Feather River West Levee Project, take several years from concept through actual construction. The project, this is just a map, and I know it's difficult to see that the different colors end with the northern reach, the green reach, and this is that all those colors delineate the west bank of the Feather River. Okay, so these are all the levees that protect communities on the west side of the Feather River from flooding from the Feather River. Now in the north, the project extends from Thermalito Afterbay on Oroville Dam all the way down to Star Bend in the south. That's a distance about 35, actually it's more about 37 miles. And we're doing work on just about every reach of that levee, or just about every portion of that levee. The levees, when they were constructed, were put up by pioneer farmers. They weren't engineered, they weren't designed, they didn't use modern equipment. We have some pictures literally of mules and hand laborers pushing up dirt on the west bank of the Feather River. So there's no real design to these things, even though they've been protecting us for about 150 years from flooding from the Feather River. So this project goes back and sort of retrofits these levees and installs something called a slurry wall in most of these reaches, these levees, and I'll describe what that is, to sort of retrofit these levees so that they can provide adequate flood protection so the river waters don't either overtop or come through underneath the levee. So the project is unchanged. It's about 27 miles. We're in our third year of 4 years of construction. So we expect to finish everything on the 37 miles by the end of calendar year 2016, including the additional increment, the new project, Laurel Avenue, which is about a mile south near the confluence of the Sutter Bypass and Feather River. It's all 200-year level of protection. The Laurel Avenue, of course, is in the rural south, and that is just one increment, and it has to be combined with many other reaches in the future before it provides 100-year protection. The total cost of the project, and I'll describe what that project is in a little bit, is about $290 million. If you add the Laurel Avenue components, about $300 million worth of work. And it took place in terms of Central Valley construction in pretty much record time. I mean, if you look around the valley and see all of the projects that have been built over the years, you'd be hard-pressed to find a project that advanced so much complex slurry wall work in such a short period of time. We started final design in about 2010, 2011, started construction in 2013, and we anticipate completing all of the construction in 2016. The way these things are funded is a little unusual. By unusual, I mean it's relatively a recent concept. So traditionally, the Corps of Engineers builds these things. This is the federal agency. The federal government comes in and they build these things. And it usually takes, no kidding, about 20 years from an idea to get through Congress to authorize a project, and then another act of Congress to get the money to build a project, and then a lot of time to do the engineering and design. So literally, when typical federal government projects, you're looking at decades, not years, from beginning to end for a big project like this. So this is a little unusual in that it's being constructed by you, local agencies, and it's leveraging state money at the tune of about 76% of the total cost, matched by our 24% cost from our assessment district to pay for this project. But that's the way a lot of local agencies are doing it, and in combination with state money. So, next slide. So what are we doing? So for that 37 miles that you saw on the prior screen, for most of that mileage, we're not building new levees. We're leaving the existing levees pretty much where they are. So if you go out there before our construction project, and then you come back after we've done our construction project, you're going to see pretty much the same levee. It's going to be a lot cleaner, a lot neater, less vegetation, but it's going to be in the same place, same elevation. It's going to look pretty much the same. So what we're doing is, for most of the project, is we're constructing a slurry wall through the levee. And to understand what a slurry wall does, you have to understand why levees fall down. And there are a lot of ways that levees can fall down. But in the Sacramento Valley, if you were just to name the one failure mechanism, the reason that levees fall down is not because water comes over the top of the levee, not because water comes through the levee, right? So in this picture, you see the blue, which is the riverside during a flood event. Water comes up, doesn't normally come over the top of the levee and fail. It doesn't come through the levee. The way all of the major levee failures that have occurred in the Sacramento Valley, it comes underneath the levee, which is kind of counterintuitive. You think of things falling down because water comes over the top or it comes through. That's not the case. What happens is, as shown in this slide, you have the high pressure of the river that shows up on the right side of the screen, and underneath the levee, there's a lot of sand and gravel. And this pervades the whole Sacramento Valley system. Sand and gravel is very porous. Water can get through it. And when the riverside of that levee, the water levels find that gravel and come underneath the levee, they pop up on the other side and they form something called boils, which is just basically water coming out of the ground. And this is what they look like. If you've ever seen a boil, and many of you have, maybe many of you have flood fought, it looks like water just boiling out of the ground. And if it goes unchecked, you have catastrophic failures. And just to give you an indication of the magnitude of those failures, in 1955, 38 people died when a levee failed at Shanghai Bend. That's when there were 10,000 people in Yuba City. Today there's 70,000 people. There would be many more deaths, far more people impacted if that failure were to take place today. And what's interesting, particularly about the 1955 failure, when we went back to look at this area that was, quote, fixed, it still had all this gravel and garbage underneath the levee that could lead to another failure. So we were happy to plug that up with the slurry wall. So all the slurry wall does, it's a 3-foot wide trench that's excavated, literally a 3-foot wide trench with the biggest excavators in the world. And it trenches right through the top of the levee, down into the foundation, and it cuts through all that porous sand and gravel. And then we fill it up with clay, which doesn't pass water. If you've ever played around with clay, it's a very impervious, it's like rubber. Clay and water in existing soils. And you fill this trench up that's 3 feet wide and literally 110 feet deep, up to 120 feet deep, fill it up with clay, and that presents a cutoff. So water can't go from the right side of the screen, which is where the river is, to the wrong side of the screen, the left side of the screen on the land side. Very simple concept. It's been around since the 40s. Very difficult to implement. It takes very specialized equipment. And of course, it's rather pricey, to the tune of $300 million for the cost of our project, which is about 27 miles of slurry wall. Okay. So, as for the highlights of what happened last year, and I'll just give a summary of what happened last year, what we're planning for next year, and some of the construction activity you'll be seeing this year. So we acquired Section 106, Corps of Engineers construction approval. That's a big deal because, as I've reported to this board before, back in 2000, or to the council before, back in 2014, we encountered significant Native American cultural sites. These are village sites. These are artifact sites. These were the remains of ancient civilizations dating back thousands of years. And as a result of that, much of the construction was halted in 2014. We had to revisit all of our permitting documents. We made way too many newspaper articles. There was, quite an interruption and cost associated with that. We've resolved those through 2015, and we're able to advance our most of our construction schedule in 2015. So all of that work, about 7.5 miles of levee were fitted with slurry walls, a couple of miles of berms were constructed last year. That's the hardcore construction that was completed last year. And all of the associated right-of-way and permitting. The other big deal, it's a kind of a, we like to think of it as an achievement, but I guess it's more of a bureaucratic achievement, is we got a commitment from the Department of Water Resources for the balance of our funding. And that may not seem like a big deal, but it really is, that we now have a commitment from the state to fund everything from Thermalito down to Star Bend. Okay, the rest of this, there's two projects that I think the folks are going to be hearing about. They're up north, but they're still part of the Feather River West Levee project. The first is the Gridley Bridge Erosion Project. That's a project that was added on. It's necessary to achieve 200-year protection for Yuba City. So even though it's in Gridley, if we don't provide that erosion protection, we don't get certification for 200-year protection. So that design and permitting is beginning in earnest, and we're tagging that on to the Feather River West Levee project this year. The second project is what's referred to as the Oroville Wildlife Area Flood Stage Reduction Project. That is a multi-benefit project that incorporates flood control, eco-restoration, recreation, and operations and maintenance benefits, and that's taking place just below Thermalito Afterbay on both the east and west sides of the Feather River. The other project, I mentioned Laurel Avenue, and I mentioned the state funding for the regional planning effort. So I'm going to sort of, this is my second to last slide. The work that we have going forward is, it's not the big production year where we completed 17.5 miles of slurry wall back in 2014. There are a lot of loose ends we have to tie up this year in order to complete the project. So we still have some issues to resolve with cultural resources in Sutter County. We're close, but we haven't inked the deal with the Corps of Engineers to resolve the permitting for the last gaps in the Sutter County work. We expect to close out all the rest of the project, basically from Thermalito down to Star Bend, to close out all the reaches of the project in 2016. There's several hundred encroachments. Encroachments is a long word for pipes that go through levees, for retaining walls that stick into a levee, an illegal building, and we've got a lot of those that have been placed on the levee, anything that affects the performance of a levee. So those things have to be addressed through this year, and there's literally about 100 pipe penetrations and a couple of hundred other encroachments. The rest of these pertain to the normal right-of-way permitting. I won't get into this. Right-of-way permitting, design, all the paperwork that we have to put forward and get approved by literally 48 permitting agencies or permits before we can move a shovel full of dirt. The Sutter Basin Flood Risk Management Project, that's a federal project, will begin in earnest, if only to start the federal advocacy, the lobbying to get appropriations into the president's budget in time for construction. Practically speaking, 17-18 it would be realistic to think that we're going to get into design through the much slower federal process. We are applying for a small community grant proposal. This is another state-funded grant program that allows state investment into the rural portions of the southern part of the basin, the rural portions that have not, so far, not seen any investment in the levees quite yet, other than Laurel Avenue. And I talked about the Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is my last slide. There's a bunch of things going on this winter, even though it's raining outside and we typically shut down. Levee engineers and constructors do all of their work during sunny weather, because during the winter, we need those levees to be up while the river potentially could flood. So, for example, we don't excavate levees typically. Sometimes we do. We don't excavate levees at the beginning of winter season, just when we need them to protect us from flooding. So we have kind of a shortened construction season that extends from about April 15th to November 1st, typically. Now, during these drought years, we've been, quote, fortunate, end quote, in that because it's been so dry, we've been able to work into the winter. But that doesn't always happen. And so for this year, we knew this was going to be an El Nino winter. We closed up shop early. Well, we closed up work on time in November and didn't risk going to construction through the winter. However, we are still working, and we are replacing some pipe penetrations up in Butte County. We're working on one right now that we just started in Butte County, and will continue as long as the weather holds, and as long as Oroville is as empty as it is. I think the last time I looked at Oroville, it was only 43% full. The normal design permitting funding is taking place. I talked about the Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan, two important efforts, the FEMA Ag effort and the O&M costs effort. And then appropriations for Sutter Basin Flood Risk Management Project, the federal project, that's beginning in earnest. Actually, at the end of this month, there's a trip to Washington, D.C. Chair Gill will be accompanying us in that effort to acquire appropriations for the larger federal investment. We're hoping to get about $35–40 million out of the federal government to advance the rest of the project. I'm not going to talk about the last one. Next slide. Okay, so I think I've already talked about the challenges, the obstacles facing us. I talked about cultural resources. If you ever want to stop a project dead in its tracks, right of way, in my experience, is the easiest way to do that. If you can't acquire the property, the project just stops. We've been very fortunate in bringing to resolution before we had to go to court on 300 properties. The community has really come together over this project, and we're very fortunate, but we're not done yet. Federal appropriations I talked about. We have authorization. That's great, but you need another act of Congress, appropriations, in order to get the money in the bank so that you can build something. I talked about the Oroville Wildlife Area. That's planned to go to construction in 2017. Talked about O&M governance and funding. One thing that's taking place is there's a draft that I think the council may be interested in, is of the Department of Water Resources system-wide improvement program. So they've been planning improvements for the Sutter Bypass. And so you're going to get the first indication of what's going to appear in the 2017 plan in the next month or so. You're going to see what the department's thinking about the Sutter Bypass. That's my last slide. Dan, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Any questions of Mike?
To the mayor, not any questions, just a couple of comments to some of the students. Mike Inamini is our executive director for the Sutter Buttes Flood Control Agency, and prior to coming to work here, Mike was with the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Water Resources. Close, yeah. When 1987, when we got evacuated and the levee broke in Marysville and the water started coming back, and Mike never shares his story, but Mike was one of the people that was actually on the levee with dynamite trying to blow levee so the water wouldn't start backing up or it would start going into the Bear River. So a lot of extensive stuff, but I think one of the things you mentioned, this is not any project that we've seen like in the past. And I can assure you everybody here in this community, as well as our partners with our agencies and everybody in Washington, D.C. knows about this levee project the Sutter Buttes Flood Control Agency is doing. Because by the time that as a community we passed our bond, we were so far behind Natomas and the rest of the cities that from 2010, and by the time we actually started to time 2016, here we are right now in 2016, majority of this project is going to be completed. And to have 200-year flood protection in some areas and 100-year flood protection in other areas, Laurel Avenue, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment to where this community was. And had we not been able to do this, this entire community would have been mapped into FEMA's flood map area, which means every single resident in this community as a household would be paying higher premiums for flood insurance, and there would be absolutely no development, no economic boom in this community. Everything would have come to a screeching halt. So, it seems like $300 million is a lot of money, which it is, but it was because of these community members that decided to tax themselves to put it in a share to get these projects completed. So, great job.
Any other comments? The only comment I have, Mike, is thank you to your staff for the hard work that they continue to do. It's 365 days out of the year that you guys are really working on this. I know you have some days off, but it never goes away, and it will be that way until this project is completed. and your dedication to that has helped move this project forward, and certainly to the existing board that helps support the efforts from the many different jurisdictions. So thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to one-up you that and explain that these projects don't come together without elected representation. It takes a lot of political will to bring folks together, and the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency is run by 13-member board of directors. Many of this council have served on that volunteer position, one of their many volunteer positions, and it's to the board's credit that this thing has come around. It was a long time in coming, and I know there was a lot of naysayers when I was with the Department of Water Resources, and it's just a really shining example of how communities come together and do real work. So thank you.
Thank you.
To the mayor. Just a quick comment. To put this in perspective, this $300 million project is the largest project this community has ever seen and probably will ever see in our lifetimes and probably your lifetime. And so to get this put together from 2007 to 2016 has been a monumental task. And to put that in perspective, when the Corps of Engineers started their feasibility study back in 2001, by 2010, they were approximately 30% completed with their study to tell us what we already knew, that we needed to fix our levees. And when Mike talks about decades for these federal projects, just a study, if you extrapolate that out, would have taken nearly 30 years just to tell us what we already knew. And we said, we can't wait. And that's where the Joint Powers was put together, and this project has been completed. And it is one of the models now that the Corps of Engineers uses across the country to plan and fix these type of projects. And I want to thank you again, Mike, for your part in this.
Thank you.